All right, welcome back, and let's continue our conversation about culture. The next few slides are going to be about Hofstede and his six dimensions of culture and what they are. It's a lot of heavy information, a lot of thick information. I'm going to fly through this as quickly as possible, but it's going to be important for you to look at the slides and kind of spend more time on the slides to kind of understand these things or to reference them whenever you need to come back to them. But hopefully, this will give you a good way to start in your own study. So in order to do our midterm and final projects, one of the things you're going to need to do is look up the Hofstede scores for your culture or your society or country that you're going to be working on. The easiest way to do that is to just simply go to Google and type in Hofstede in the United States or Hofstede in any other country. Usually you will see this country comparison tool in the top few results. I research power distance myself, so you'll obviously see why Google has put power distance up higher, because I search for that all the time. And so here's the country comparison tool. When you click on that, it takes you to a page that looks similar to this, where you can type in U or United Nations or United, and it will give you all the options. You can also type in plenty of other countries. Another cool feature to this is that you can type in and select one country and then add another country to it so that you can see them side by side. Now, a little tip: be sure to learn how to take a screenshot. You're going to need this information for your midterm and your final project. It's very easy for me to identify whenever a student has just simply gone to Google and searched for the scores, or searched like a Google image search and tries to pull out outdated scores or something from an older website. So I'll know if you haven't gone to the new website or you haven't paid attention to this. So just make sure that you use this version to get your screenshot to use your graph in your midterm or final project. But let's talk about each and individual one of these six dimensions so that you have an understanding of what they are and are not. So the six dimensions, to recap one time, the six dimensions are power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. Now, each one of these has a kind of unique meaning that may not exactly line up with what I think the word means or what you think the word means. So let's try to talk about each one of those. So first of all, power distance. Power distance is the dimension that deals with how we as a society feel about attitudes of inequality among power. And so what you might think about this is that we realize that there are people with high power and low power in society. That's always going to happen. But the distance between those who don't have power and those who do have power, the comfort that we have with that distance, is what power distance is about. So high power distance cultures are really okay with a big gap between those who are on the bottom and those who are on the top. Lower power distance cultures mean that you expect that those with it and those without it are much closer together and that there's a smaller gap. So some things that we might expect whenever we see power distance, high power distance, we think of things like hierarchy. People operate using titles. A lot of monarchy countries are based upon higher power distance, and you'll again see that big gap between those who have and those who have not. In the low power distance cultures, the idea, instead of having titles and status and hierarchy, what you look for is the worth that somebody has is what they can contribute. And so think about the United States. Whenever we were even more segregated than we are today, we were okay with black people moving into the sports arena because they could prove themselves to be great athletes. However, now we realize that that was ridiculous, that our body abilities in terms of athletics are fine, but whenever we were highly segregated, we first allowed black athletes to come in because they could show their worth through the fact that they could contribute on whatever athletic field that was they were competing in. And so low power distance also incentivizes innovation, creativity, and achievement, because your worth is about what you can do. Your worth isn't about what family you were born into or what position or title you hold. All right, so let's move to individualism. The fundamental issue here is the degree of interdependence that we feel with the members of our society. And so maybe one way you could look at this is high individualism, it's all about I or me. But in low individualistic countries or collectivist countries, then the idea is more about we than me. And so high individualistic countries only look after themselves and their direct family, where the lower the individualism is that concept of myself, it's more broad. And so that my family is considered to be a bigger group of people than what an individualistic might say. In our country, your family, most people might just say that that's me and my brother and sister, or me and my wife and my daughter. But in collectivist cultures, it's always going to be bigger. It's going to be my aunts and uncles, and then there's going to be people who aren't related to me that I'll consider to be family. But my duty is not just to take care of me, it's to take care of myself and those who are in that group in low individualistic cultures. So some things you might observe in a individualistic culture. High cultures would have priority on one's own achievement. They would think that standing out of the crowd is good. But in low cultures, it's concerned for how you fit into the group. Your family matters just as much as you do. And you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb, because there's a saying in certain collectivist cultures, he who sticks out like a sore thumb will get it cut off. Now, this dimension of masculinity, I think, is probably the most easy to misunderstand. It is also the most awkwardly worded, but Hofstede came up with this scale back in the 1980s, and we are stuck with these terms for today. So, a high masculine culture is driven by competition, achievement, and success. High masculine cultures, it's important to be the winner or to be the best, again, because we really work towards competition. In low masculine cultures, which would be considered feminine, what's most important, the dominant values there, are caring for others and having a high quality of life. So, for instance, the United States is a middle of the road masculine culture. And so, for instance, there are zero protections in our legal system for parents or mothers who have a baby to take family leave. There are certain laws that say you can't fire a person if they take what's called FMLA, but that means that whenever they come back from that leave, you could hire them as a janitor. But in certain countries, like for instance Sweden, who is the highest masculine or highest feminine score, that country has 480 days of paid parental leave per child, because what's most important in that culture is quality of life compared to a high masculine culture, which is about competition and achievement. So the fundamental issue here is being your best in a masculine culture, or just liking what you do in a low masculine or a feminine culture. So some things you would see in masculine issues of culture. In high issues, masculine cultures would honor heroes. They value competition, and being a very assertive person is seen as a good thing for a leader. Also, whenever you kind of reward somebody, they need to be tangible rewards like pay raises or bonuses or cars or things that people can see. In a low culture, what you're going to observe are things like modesty, not necessarily in dress, but just kind of your personality pulling things back instead of being kind of more of that individualistic hero. We value things like cooperation in low masculine cultures, and caring for the weak, and also working to improve one's quality of life, or the quality of life in the society. So if we move on, we're now in the last half here, the last three. One of those is uncertainty avoidance, and this dimension focuses on the way that a society deals with the fact that the future can never be known. So, for instance, Japan is a very high uncertain avoidance culture, and they try to ritualize a lot of their behaviors. They're kind of routine and done the same way, because that way you can expect to get the same result every time. One thing that uncertain avoidance happens is what happens with uncertainty avoidance, if it's a very high value, you'll see people not be as innovative. And so, for instance, Japan is not very innovative as a country. They don't create things from scratch, but they can take things that other people have created and they can make them better than they've ever been before. But you don't take big risks in an uncertain culture, or a culture that avoids uncertainty. Let me tell you a little bit more about some things you'll see here. So in high cultures, you'll see a need to control the future. You prioritize orthodox or behavior that conforms to the norms. In low cultures, you try to do things that you just say, hey, let's accept it and let it happen. We'll figure it out, later down the road. Do what works in the moment rather than try to do what's safe and what's always worked in the past. All right. The next one, long-term orientation. This one I think could be easily confused if you don't pay a little bit more attention to it. So it's how that a culture maintains the links with its past and dealing with changes for the future. And so this idea says that long-term oriented cultures that have that high value are more likely to see the need to change their culture, where short-term cultures are just looking to maintain the kind of status quo. And so in those high or long-term cultures, things are really important, like traditions, norms, and they're suspicious of new trends that come in. In short-term oriented cultures, then what you see is an embracing of evolution of society. You see things like they want to modernize their culture, and they want to focus on educating people in order to embrace the changes that are going to come. All right, let's move on to indulgence. Indulgence is about the way that people feel that they can or cannot control their personal desires or impulses. So what you might think about this is that Russia is a very low indulgence culture, and Mexico is a very high indulgence culture. And so Mexicans are really known for being hard workers and also for being, hard at play, right? They want to have a great time in life and they want to work hard. And so they feel like because of their hard work ethic that they also should have the time to kind of have a fiesta, and just kind of take life easy at the same time as working really hard. A culture like Russia, who has very low indulgence, they just sit back and say, well, I really can't get ahead in life, and so I just got to do what I got to do. When there have been major sporting events like the Olympics or the World Cup in Russia, one of the things they have to do in that culture is teach their customer service people to actually be friendly and smile. McDonald's did a whole training session like they'd never done before whenever they went to Russia in the 80s, just to get their people at the cash registers to be friendly and smile. And so in high indulgence cultures, what you'll see is that customer service is friendly, that people respect the freedom of speech, and that there is an emphasis on one's personal responsibility to control themselves and to move ahead in life. Where in low cultures, there's a sense of helplessness about the life conditions that we experience. We just kind of say, things are the way they are, and I should just grin and bear it. All right, this has been a very quick introduction to the 6 dimensions of Hofstede's culture. I hope that what you'll do is kind of review this information to kind of understand it, and then as we get closer to the midterm and the final, that you'll look over these to make sure you understand the definition, and that you can come back to these whenever there's a quiz to look over the definitions that you've got. All right, take care.